Okay. Welcome to the Stanley Law Office's webinar monthly. We try to do these monthly, and because Joe believes strongly in advocating and educating, the more knowledge, the better, and putting that knowledge to work and leveraging it for the better of you, your family, your business is just smart. And so we are talking today, joined by attorneys Peter Adanizio and Jamie Richards of the team at Stanley Law. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
And we're talking winter weather and the law today, Joe. So winter is just around the corner in upstate New York and across Pennsylvania and the Northeast, of course. So that brings wreaks all sorts of havoc on the highways and on sidewalks and buildings for cars and travelers alike. So let's talk a little bit, Joe. I'm going to turn this over to you. You can share what we're going to go through today, and then we've got some slides to kick everything off. And by the way, I am taking your questions. We are live, so if you have a question, put it in the comments on Facebook and I'll pose it to the attorney. Okay, Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Angela, Peter, and Jamie. Thanks for participating, because you're going to do all the work. I'm just going to sit here and watch. But, there was snow in the air on Sunday already, so it's not too far behind when the real thing comes. And, we're going to talk about the legal and practical aspects. But one of the things that everybody should realize, if you've been here or you haven't been here, no one remembers how to drive in the snow, and that the first snowstorm always results in hundreds, if not multiple hundreds of cars being involved in accidents going off the road because A, they forgot how to drive, B, they weren't prepared, they don't have their tires on, et cetera, et cetera. So remember, it's always good to refresh yourself on how to drive in the snow. And if you've never driven in the snow before, if you're here first-time visitors, whether you're at Fort Drum or somewhere else, when it snows for the first time, go to an empty parking lot and figure out how your car actually goes in the snow, how it really works, and how ridiculous your summer tires are going to be in the snow, because they really don't work well in the snow. That's how I was taught how to drive, and that's how I taught my children how to drive in the snow, because best way to do it, because you don't want to figure out how to do it on the roadways. It's kind of hazardous. And it's just common sense. People forget, and we're all going to say it, and we all been here. Oh, the first snowstorm, everybody's in the ditch and everybody's run into everybody. And it's true, and it's going to happen again. You just don't want to be one of those people. So a word to the wise, that's just from living here my whole life. I can say it. I've said it. I'm not sure that hopefully everyone listens, but Jamie's going to start with the practical legal tips about what happens if you get involved in the snow or winter. And then Peter's going to follow up. Jamie's going to do the cars, and Peter's going to do the buildings and the premises. So Jamie, welcome to the webinar world, and go to it.
Thank you. So Joe, you actually mentioned our first slide right there. So the two things I wanted to focus on first is preparing for the conditions. So Central New York, upstate New York, snow comes and goes as it pleases. You could be driving, it could be clear, and then suddenly covered in snow. So always drive forward the conditions. Keep an eye on the weather. If you're traveling for a couple of hours, you never know what's going to happen, lake effect, all of that, take that into account. And Joe also mentioned being prepared for the weather. So the snow is coming. People will wait to the last minute to get their snow tires on, and then they panic because everybody's booked up until middle of winter. So it's something that you want to start planning for. I would say now, getting those appointments made, getting your tires, making sure they're all up to date, cars inspected, all of that. You do not want to be on the side of the road with car problems. Pete, if you have anything to add in on any of that, feel free.
Well, I think sometimes winter weather is underestimated, and I know the Federal Highway Administration put out some figures, and more than 1,300 people are killed every year in winter-related crashes. That's an astonishing number, and it's something that we don't think about it when we get that first snow or that first ice. You know, could I be involved in a serious crash like that? But those figures don't lie, and we are all mindful that we live in an area where winter can catch us in a couple of different ways. You may be driving on a dry road, and then you have a whiteout. There could be blowing snow and thick drifts that you wouldn't even know that's there unless you're experienced. That can also catch us off guard. And of course, the sleet and the ice. You know the saying, they say, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute. Well, that's something that we got to be mindful of in central New York and even downstate where the salt and snow removal processes aren't as strong as central New York. But that's the key as far as being ready for the winter conditions. And then Jamie will tell us, well, what happens if I'm in a crash? If I'm in a crash by myself, what do I do? Or if I'm in a crash with another vehicle that's at fault, what's the best approach?
So I would just say, if you are in an accident, always try to get somewhere safe before you stop. If you're in an accident, you go off the road, and it's just your car involved, there's always, just legally make you aware of, there's no fault insurance. So that is covered through the vehicle that you are in. So if you happen to be injured and you need to seek treatment, you have the no fault coverage available for that. And you always want to give your providers that information. Any questions, we can help you with that. It does need to be submitted within 30 days. So just be mindful of any timeframes for that. If there's another vehicle involved, you have another potential claim for any bodily injury that you might incur. That gets very fact specific, depends on what happened, what your injuries are. And that's other things that we take into account and we can assist with.
And I will add a story here about something that I read, because I have family down in Pennsylvania, about highways, and you don't want to break down. And this wasn't even wintertime, but on Saturday on the interstate near Philadelphia, there was a horrible accident. It closed the Pennsylvania Turnpike in both directions because somebody had a flat tire, and they stopped their vehicle partially in the traveled lane of the highway, and someone was slowing down to try and avoid them. And there was a jet fuel truck coming behind them that was going too fast, hit the car slowing down, and there was a huge crash and explosion, and the car slowing down and the driver of the jet fuel truck got killed. The people who stopped to change the tires did not get hurt, but their legal liability will be astronomical. The highway both ways was closed for almost half a day. So, you know, those are one of those things about keeping your car in good shape and having common sense. If something happens, and in the wintertime, people have even less ability to stop. So if you have something happens, get off the road.
Yeah.
And when you look at, you're talking about that with the speed certainly, which is the case in almost every car accident, distraction and speeding. Can you talk a little bit, Peter, about the, following too closely, and kind of what are the rules for that, and talk about, you and Jamie, both of the points on this slide here.
Sure. This slide sort of reflects some of the more common vehicle and traffic law citations that we see in the winter. Obviously, the vehicle and traffic law has numerous sections, but in the winter, there's these that are in particular. If you return to that,
Yes.
yeah, there we go. So the three big ones is, you're driving along and maybe you have a visibility problem, or there's bad road conditions, or even if the roads are fine, if your vehicle comes in contact with the car in front of you, if you rear end the car or truck in front of you, you might be cited for what we call following too closely. And you may say, well, wait, I wasn't following too closely. You may be deemed to have been following too closely. And similarly, if you're the one that was struck from behind, a ticket may be given to the person who was driving that car behind you or truck behind you for following too closely. Whether they think they were following too closely or not, it may be a violation of the law. And serious accidents can result from those rear end collisions. You know, off camera, we were talking about visibility, and I'm sure many of the viewers got an alert. They probably saw where there was a 150 some odd car pileup down in Louisiana just the last day or two. Now, that may not necessarily have been as a result of snow or ice, but I think it was fog. It was very serious fog down there, which we have fog in the winter when you have the warm ups and the freezes. So visibility is a big part of it. And, you know, our thoughts and prayers are with those folks down there in Louisiana. But following too closely is one of the big ones that we see in the winter months.
There's some very serious fog, Peter, that comes through that 81 corridor as you're heading down from Syracuse to Binghamton and that whole area. I know that can be a treacherous spot for folks. I mean, there's no area that's immune, but that area with all the valleys through Tully, Lafayette, et cetera, can be particularly dangerous. So what about the move over law, Jamie? Talk a little bit more about what that's all about.
So Pete and I actually had a discussion about this, very heated. So we both believe that, just safety reasons, you're supposed to move over for emergency vehicles. So police, ambulance, tow trucks. Generally speaking, if you see somebody pulled over on the side of the road, if you can move over safely, we always advise that you should do that. You want to protect yourself. You want to protect the people that are stuck on the side of the road. Car is broken down, a car is being towed. You always want to be mindful of who's around you. If you need to move over in the wintertime and you see a car up ahead, it might take a little bit longer. So slow it down a little bit, see who's around, make sure the road conditions are fine. If there's snow, it might take you a little bit longer to move over, but you should always be moving over for vehicles that are stopped.
And what about if you're trying to move over, but then obviously it's heavy traffic and it's not physically possible for you to move over in certain situations like that? How do you, I mean, is there some gray area as to whether I'm at fault or not because I did or didn't move over if there's heavy traffic and I'm concerned about changing lanes because of slush or conditions, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say think about the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is safety. All right. So I'm driving along. I see a car off the road. I see a AAA vehicle trying to help a motorist. I see a utility vehicle, and it doesn't only apply to law enforcement. It applies to utility vehicles or other public service vehicles that may or may not have their flashing lights on. The first thing you do is check safely to see if I can move over. If there's a line of cars to your left, let's say, coming up from behind, it may be difficult to make that move over. So what do? Slow down. Try to do whatever you can to be as safe as possible to avoid any type of A, collision, or B, if it is icy and snowing, to lose control of that vehicle. You want to just exercise extra caution. I also mentioned with Jamie that many times I'll be driving on some of the rural roads, whether it be going home or just to the grocery store, and I see people walking dogs. I see joggers, runners, people with strollers. And although it's not a move over law requirement to move over, you know, if it's safe, move your car to the left a little bit, so long as you're not going into the other lane and causing a hazard. But the idea is safety. Try to look out for the other person as best you can.
And Peter makes an interesting point about rural roads. And a lot of our area we service, the number of accidents and deaths in our area per highway roads are astronomical compared to urban areas because of the nature of the roadways. Rural roads, they are not necessarily well designed and well constructed, and in the wintertime they are notoriously poorly maintained and subject to sudden changes. So you know, there's all sorts of things. The roads aren't as good, and if you go off the road at any kind of speed, you're probably in really bad shape. So it's just the way it is, and the number of deaths, as I say, on rural highways in upstate New York are one of the highest in the country. So
we have a question. What if you're looking, and this is just kind of anecdotal, I would say, because you're not going to have the exact numbers in front of you, but in our part of the world, Joe, how much, by a factor of what, increases the number of accidents as we head into the winter months over the other times of the year? If you had to
I can
estimate.
tell you that just anecdotally, having been doing this for an incredibly long period of time, the differences in the number of new accident clients we represent from a mild winter to a bad to severe winter is probably more than double. So
Wow.
that is the number of accidents there are weather related. So, and that's just, it makes sense to me. I've lived here. I know people, you know, when the weather's bad, there's many more accidents, especially when it's over a long period of time. So, you know, the way it is, and then we have to be prepared for it, because a lot of times you can be safe, but you have to really look out for the other people who don't have proper snow tires, are going too fast. Their cars aren't maintained properly. And, you know, we are at risk by other people's bad behavior.
So Peter and Jamie, both, if you want to walk us through this next slide, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, sure. Jamie, you can start and I'll jump in.
Sure. So for the as far as safe driving in general, there's an emergency doctrine. So sometimes things come up unexpectedly that we can't prevent an accident. When it comes to claims that involve an emergency situation, it's very, very fact specific. Taking into account, so some notes that we have here. So the blinding sun, glares, especially in wintertime, the sun hits the snow, makes things very difficult to see. Sun is bright, snow is bright. It can lead to accidents. Same thing this time of year, especially where I live, deer hop out in front of the cars all the time on the highways. It's stuff, unfortunately, you can't really prepare for. So again, it's slowing down, being aware of your surroundings, and then we take into account what happened. Were you going 85 on a 40 and a deer hopped out and there was nothing to be done, in which case there's a speed issue, or were you going this speed and the roads were bad? It's all, again, very fact specific.
Sure.
Accidents happen.
There have been a lot of cases having to do with glare, ice, and the blinding sun. Picture yourself, late in the day, 4:30, 5 o'clock, it's getting dark, and that sun peeks through that sky, very low in the sky, and you make a turn. Let's say you're going west at 4:30 in the afternoon, boom, the sun is right in your eyes. Can create some real visibility problems. You do your best with your visor, you put your sunglasses on, but you really have to be careful. And sometimes the law doesn't, treat us with the way we want to be treated. We may think, well, the sun blinded me. That was an emergency condition. I shouldn't be held responsible.
The sun is not an emergency. The sun
That's
is
right.
the sun is there all the time. Sun's not an emergency. Maybe an emergency for you, but It's something that it's like anything else. Claiming the snow is an emergency is also, the problem is that it's there and it's everywhere, and you're obligated to take reasonable steps to anticipate it and precautions. So using that as an excuse is lame at best and legally insufficient.
Right. And the cases have held that. So again, you have to watch those conditions because they creep up on us. You may not expect it. And, you know, lo and behold, there it is.
I will say
Okay,
that
so snowplow, yeah, so let's talk about snowplow liability, because that is
Everybody loves this one.
that's an interesting, who on this webinar has not at one point or another been frustrated but once you're stuck behind a parade of 3 or 4 snowplows, but it's just part of life. So can you talk
Well,
a
that's
little
not
bit?
the issue. That's not the issue. They engage in negligent conduct all the time and they're legally immune. I mean, I think it's a horribly bad rule that you allow them a free pass for engaging in questionable behavior at best, but I didn't make the law. That's just my opinion.
Can you expand on that, Jamie?
Sure. So for snow plows, unfortunately in New York State, if it is and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, municipality, a state plow, the standard is a reckless disregard. So we have clients call all the time who say the snow plow started reversing, hit me, snow plow made a sudden U-turn in the middle of the road. I want to bring a claim against them. And unfortunately, courts generally rule that that is not, doesn't meet the standard. Plows have a lot of leniency in what they are entitled or allowed to do. And unfortunately, there's not much that we can do as far as that. And I don't know what the solution is.
Change the law. And actually they get a bigger free pass than police and ambulances, which is the most ironic thing in the world, is that they have more immunity from their behavior than anybody, which I don't think that the law as it's interpreted is what was intended. But again, sometimes those things happen.
So even so that I'm clear on this, even private plow operators?
No, this is only municipal.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it says cannot be negligent, didn't look, failed to see car coming that was there to be seen, etc. Peter, can you talk a little bit about that, then the difference between?
Yes. The private plow operators, the contractors, the small businesses, the standard there is they cannot be negligent in the operation of their vehicle. In other words, if they fail to look, if they go through a stop sign or a red light, if they do an improper turn, they're going to be held, they'll be on the hook for the negligent operation of their plow if it's a private company. If it's a municipal or a state plow, the standard is reckless. That means that there has to be a conscious indifference to human life, and essentially gives them a free pass, because even if they do an illegal U-turn in the middle of a 4-way intersection, that might be negligent, where the private plow may be held responsible.
That's a typo there, Angela, by the way. It's can be.
Yes.
They can be negligent. Yep. And that's a
Okay.
typo in there. So,
gotcha.
but that's the main difference. The municipal plows are held to a higher standard. They can get away with more. And as Joe mentioned, they get a free pass essentially, unless it's conscious disregard for human life. And we don't see that all that often.
Joe,
Almost
I
never.
remember a long time ago, you made the comment, just as, and again, anecdotally, if you're near a tractor trailer on a highway, do your best in a safe way, do your best to just get away from them, pass them, get past them, and keep going. The same, I would believe, in some way, shape, or form is true about the snowplow. If this is the case and they can't be held negligent essentially for just about everything under the sun, then your best job is to be defensive and to just get past them or try to take another route. I mean, what's your recommendation in that case, Joe? Particularly as you say, if their behavior so often is badly, and I know we've probably all experienced it. I've seen them just turn without any signal. I don't know where they're going, and suddenly they're going and they either slow down or turn in front of me or whatever the case may be.
That's a tough question to answer, because, you know, most of the time you don't really have any choice. So you just have to deal with planning on their erratic behavior, and hopefully that, you know, you can navigate it safely. I mean, there's no real good answer to that. It's, you try to be as safe as you can and just assume that they're going to behave erratically and avoid them as much as you can.
Yeah. Okay, holiday parties. There will be many of those coming up. So Jamie, what do we need to be mindful of here? I mean, it all seems like common sense, but has to be stated because clearly it's a big issue.
Yes. So holidays, we've got Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas, we've got New Year's, all the big, unfortunately, drinking events. So just be mindful. We do not condone drinking and driving. Obviously, so be very, very careful. Unfortunately, the issue is, again, we can always handle how we're operating our own vehicles, but it's also, we need to hope and assume, or actually don't assume, we need to hope that other people are doing what they're doing to be safe as well. So unfortunately, when you are drinking, your reaction times are reduced. So you might have a glass of wine and then a little bit later drive. So just be mindful that you might not be able to, your reaction time is slower, your thought processes are slower. So drinking can alter your driving. And not condoning it, I just don't know how else to say it. If you're going to have a glass of wine or a drink, you need to be careful.
Have a designated driver.
Yeah, well, yes.
Right. Peter, would you like to chime in on that?
It's the best of intentions. It's the best of intentions. Someone goes to a gathering, no intention of driving. And then next thing they do, they have a few drinks and something inside says, I can make it home okay. You have to really exercise caution because not only do the winter conditions affect your perception, but they affect your braking distance. If your perception is slowed and your reaction time is slowed, you may apply the brakes in an emergency situation too slowly, and the next thing you know, you're going to be following too closely, and you might hit somebody. The repercussions are awful. It's just not worth it. Designated drivers are the way to go, and the point about watching out for the other person is big, because if you're out at 1 o'clock in the morning, coming back from your grandmother's house, you paid a visit, for instance, and it's the night, before Thanksgiving, and many people are out that night, or the day before or after New Year's Eve, you never know when someone's going to come around a corner traveling out of control because they didn't exercise that caution. Safety first, just be smart.
And
you have to assume when you're out on the roads that late, typically the only people, or many of the people out on the roads that late, there's a decent probability that they have consumed alcohol on some level. That's what I try to tell my daughter anyway. Just assume if you have to be out late like that, assume that the other people have been drinking.
Well, and plus we have ride sharing or ride companies that are available almost anywhere. So there's really no excuse. So.
All right, so let's go on to our next slide. Okay, so now we're into slip and fall, and it's same thing, Joe. I mean, I would think that slip and falls notably increase during the winter season. Is that an accurate assumption?
Well, there are many more falls because of snow and ice. Yes. Yes.
All right. Okay, well, Jamie, you want to kick this slide off and then we can take it from there?
Sure. So again, in this area, surrounding areas, we get very, very cold weather. We got a lot of snow. Weather fluctuates, so we might have a cold day with a lot of snow, and then the next day might be warm, and then the following day, again, below freezing. So unfortunately, creates ice, slippery conditions, stuff that we always need to be mindful of in parking lots, sideways, driveways, everything in between.
And snow and ice covers up a lot of booby traps in the conditions in the ground. And, you're still responsible for those booby traps, and the snow and ice presents an even enhanced hazard on the defective conditions of the property themselves. So that doubly increases the problems.
You're saying like stairs, when so many stairs are off and not properly taken care of, or
No, I'm talking,
potholes,
yeah,
et
I mean,
cetera.
holes in the parking lots, defects. Yeah, stairs are notorious problems because I've never met a stair that was ever built right. I'm just saying that facetiously, but there are very few that are up to code, especially
I
on
remember
older
that
buildings.
video. I remember that video you shared that one time, Joe, where people were walking to the subway, and how many people tripped and fell on that subway, and it was maybe an eighth of an inch or a 16th of an inch can make that much of a difference. And very rarely are they all equally distanced apart or properly managed. And let's talk a little bit about, if you can, Peter, when you look at snow and ice around your home, for example, or at your church, at your business, who's responsible? And let's talk about negligence and the types of situations that can pile up and occur very quickly.
Sure. And we can do that in conjunction with this laundry list of who this applies to. Generally, there's a duty to keep your property safe and free of hazards. Many of these types of businesses, whether it's a housing authority where people live, general businesses, restaurants, professional offices, maybe someone's going to the dentist or the doctors. All of these different types of places that we go can get caught off guard if they have a winter event. Some businesses are prepared, but others are not. And regardless of whether they're prepared or not, as a general rule, they'll have a duty to keep their property safe and clear of ice and snow. Many times, people will get out of their vehicle, for instance, and they're just walking normal, even though they know there may be some ice or snow on the ground. And if there's the slightest grade, their foot can go out, they can land on themselves, causing some life-changing injuries that they had no idea was going to occur when they left the house that day. But the key about landowner responsibility, if there is a weather event, is that they can only be held responsible if the storm is done, it's completed, and they've had a chance to remedy it. For instance, someone goes to a 9 o'clock appointment to their doctor, and it's been snowing all night and it's still snowing and it's very icy. Maybe the plow came once or twice already, but they got to make that appointment. If the storm is still in progress and they fall and they get very badly hurt, it may be difficult to pursue that property owner because there's what we call a storm in progress. The owner hasn't had a reasonable time to get to it and clear it and finish it because the snow or the ice or sleet is still coming down. So the property owners have a reasonable time after the snow event or the winter event is done to address the ice and snow. After that time, if they do nothing, then they can be held responsible for people who fall and suffer life-changing injuries.
Jamie, do you have anything to add to that? Have you experienced that wherever you've lived? I know, like when you look at even the streets, would we say that extends, Peter, to municipalities, meaning the storm is still in progress and I can't get out of my driveway because the plows haven't come through?
Well, there's a lot of ways that the towns and the municipalities can avoid liability in winter. But I think that if they come through with a plow, there's going to have to be notice of a condition. It's going to be difficult to hold a town or a municipality liable for ice in the roadway. A little bit easier if it's municipal sidewalks. But generally, property owners themselves have to keep their property and their sidewalks free and clear of slippery and hazardous conditions.
Okay. Jamie, anything to add?
I think that Pete handled that pretty well. Another thing to think of, and just as far as the timing, so he says the storm in progress, it's something that we need to look into. Again, it's very fact specific. What the weather is like, what the snow accumulation was like, is it sleet? That being said, if the snow stops at 4 a.m. and somebody falls at 9 a.m., that's sufficient timing for somebody to go out there and clear a walkway or a driveway or a road. So it's all stuff that gets taken into account when assessing the case.
Okay, and we covered on this next slide, we covered some of these issues, but what, Joe, can you speak to, like, in other words, the owner should have known that there was a defect. If there were prior complaints about a pothole or issues with stairs, something in a parking lot, et cetera, then if there's documentation to that and someone slips and falls, even if it's snow covered, et cetera, that, as you stated earlier, that's not an excuse to not have that repaired. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, snow and ice just makes the actual defects, permanent structural defects, even more hazardous because you don't see them. And we've handled many of those situations where people fall in potholes or there's defects they can't see and they trip over them, or they fall into a grate hole or whatever. So yeah, it's a serious problem. So it's, you have snow and ice that's slippery, and then they're covering up a condition that you can't possibly appreciate.
And Peter, this last note about the prior written notice, Joe had referenced this just a few minutes ago, but can you speak to that, the city or town with their ordinances?
Sure. Many towns, many cities have an ordinance in place, and an ordinance is a law. It's a local law versus a state law that indicates that a municipality can only be held responsible if someone falls and gets hurt if the municipality has prior written notice of the defect. There could be a gaping hole on a sidewalk and everybody knows about it. They look at it and they walk around it. Maybe someone from out of town slips and steps into it and gets injured. If there's no prior written notice and that particular municipality has an ordinance in place that requires that, usually has to go to either the town or city clerk or the Department of Public Works. If there is no written notice, then the municipality is off the hook. Again, it's a theory of the ability to address it. So that's something to be mindful of. Most municipalities have that in place. I recall there was a case that I had a long time ago. The winter had caused severe potholes in a school district parking lot. And a lot of parents were there for an event. It was a winter concert, something along those lines. And somebody fell in a pothole. And the school district wrote back through their insurance carrier that, they had no notice of it and they cannot be responsible for it. The only problem was that there were two paving machines in the parking lot off to the side. And we had an investigator take some photographs, and they finally admitted that there were minutes and meetings and there were plans to pave the parking lot because of all the potholes. And the insurance company wasn't aware of that when they wrote their letter. And of course, they changed their minds after we found out that information.
All right. Okay, so this same thing with sidewalks, keeping your sidewalk clear of snow and ice. Now, you spoke to this earlier, Peter, that you will have to be responsible for your own property, right? And same thing for business owners. You want to walk us through this slide, and then Jamie, add anything that you can, if you will.
Sure. This deals primarily with towns and cities and small towns that people walk the sidewalks. They like to window shop. They like to go from store to store, place to place, primarily, or your home. The shop or the property owner has a general duty to keep the area in front of their property clear. And I think it's a lot of common sense. If I'm a shop owner or a business owner, and I know that my goal is to have people come into my store or my place of business, I'm going to want to do what I can to make it easy for them. So I might have salt in my vestibule or foyer area where I can throw it down. I might have a shovel leaning up against the wall, but it's a general duty of anybody who has a place of business to keep the sidewalk clear in front of their place of business.
And Joe, you've pointed this out many times before. In terms of your own personal property, most of the people that are going to be using sidewalks or coming in and out, et cetera, are people that live there in the home. I mean, you want to keep that as as safe as possible and have the salt ready, et cetera, et cetera. Jamie, anything to add? Have you seen any cases? Have you worked on any cases where a sidewalk in front of a business, municipality, et cetera, has been an issue?
Yes, so unfortunately, we get a lot of sidewalk cases. Like Pete said, it's the property owner who's responsible. We need to determine who owns that portion of the sidewalk. Is it the city? Is it the property owner? The business lease? Like Pete said, common sense wise, if you own a business or a property, you just want to protect people that might be walking by to prevent any issues. Keeping salt on hand, same thing with your property. Like you just said, Angela, most people that come and go do live there, but especially with the holidays, people order lots of packages, we get delivery, mail person, UPS, Amazon, all of that. So you never know who's coming. So just to protect yourself and to take care of others, it's just something to be mindful. Shovel, salt the area, try to prevent it as best as you can.
So to be clear also, just to get clarity on this one point, if I am a landlord or I own the commercial property and I lease it to a particular business, if someone gets injured, is it the shop owner's responsibility? Are they liable, or is the individual who actually owns the commercial property liable?
Well, I would say the first thing we'll need to look at is the lease. Most of the time, if it's an out of possession landlord, they're not in the area, they may put the responsibility to keep the property clear onto the tenant. However, if we hear of someone who gets injured and we find out that there's both a tenant and an owner, we put them both on notice. The general rule is the owner is responsible unless they contract that away to the tenant by way of a lease or some other agreement.
Makes sense. Okay. Joe, any other points that you want to stress before we go on to the next slide? Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about construction, and construction certainly takes place. We've seen it all summer long, but and all along the highways. But there is construction that continues throughout the winter, and construction sites, not just construction on highways. So although it does slow down, it does happen. They don't completely halt, as this first point says. So Peter, can you walk us through this, and what are the considerations for contractors, owners where construction's taking place on their site, et cetera?
Sure. The most businesses, contractors, companies, if they're engaged in a contract and they're doing winter construction, it's rare that an employee is going to call in and say, hey, we got some bad weather today, I think I'm going to stay home. That doesn't happen. So the employee has to show up to the site. First thing, make sure you're wearing proper equipment. I'm going to assume that we're talking about an outdoor project subject to the elements. They have to be wearing the proper equipment and proper clothing, work boots, warm clothing. There's a responsibility by the employers to be sure that they have safe work environments, both under OSHA and under New York Industrial Code. If they're involved in construction, alteration, repair, or demolition of a building, and it's taking place in the winter months, they have to be working in a safe working environment. Sometimes it's not so safe. It's not so safe if they've had a winter event overnight and they're returning in the morning. There may be slippery grounds, slippery platforms. Maybe the scaffold that they put up the day before now has a coat of sleet on it. They really have to make sure that these things are safe, because if they do suffer a fall from height and they get badly injured, that's something that the contractor or the employer may be responsible for.
And so when you look at repair, demolition, et cetera, the safety devices, preventing falls, all of that, as a worker, the rule applies whether it's winter or not, you got to report it, right? I mean, it's incumbent upon you as the worker who notices it to make sure that it's documented and reported, any unsafe conditions, et cetera. Is that right?
Yeah, and as a practical matter, it really depends on the company, the contractor, and the subcontractors. Sometimes they may have toolbox talks that addresses some of these safety measures they can put in place. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll expect their employees to just quote unquote get it done, whatever it takes. Or they may say, hey, look, make sure you tie off your ladder and secure it. Make sure that scaffolding, the bars and the railings are in place. Nothing's loose. We don't want any unfortunate accidents. And then the winter weather can just compound that, because now you're dealing with, maybe your body's cold and it's not reacting as good as it could. Or maybe there's a ladder that's ready to tilt and, there's a rope that could have held it in place. There's a lot of things that can be done on the job site to prevent these types of injuries. And when they do get injured, they can become very badly injured.
Very badly injured. And it's I remember Joe once saying he's never seen a construction site accident that wasn't pretty severe. So when you look at remedies available to the worker, can you talk a little bit about what happens? What happens if you get injured on a construction site? And by the way, when we say construction sites, we're not talking just about the typical site that you might see out next to the highway or a building. This can also be people who are doing construction at a particular building, et cetera, that wouldn't be considered traditional construction. Is that right, Joe? Can you make that distinction for me? I'm not saying it as well.
Construction can happen anywhere in any place, indoors, outdoors. And it's really defined by the activities that are being undertaken. But yes, and the rules protect construction workers under certain circumstances. And if you ever suffered a significant injury in a construction accident, you really, I don't say this in most cases, but you really should talk to a lawyer, because the law is very complicated and confusing, and a lot of lawyers don't understand it. Because, the workers' compensation benefit is always there, but workers' compensation only pays what it pays. The remainder of your rights to be fully compensated for all your injuries is a difficult, complicated legal issue, and it requires an immediate investigation of the facts. So if you're hurt in a significant injury on a construction site or construction kind of work, or similar to, repairs and renovations and demolitions and things even of that nature, you really should talk to a lawyer immediately. And I'm going to end on that. I have to
You have to exit.
I have to depart. So I will let Jamie and Peter sum up. And but thank you very much. They did a great job, and thank you, everybody.
We'll hear you and see you on the TV and the radio, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks.
So Peter, any other points on this before we move forward with respect to your point here about remedies available to the worker should the worker get injured?
No, I'll make a very brief point about falling objects. When talking about construction, first of all, nobody ever plans on getting hurt. And that's the thing that, is most striking, because when it does happen, it can be life-changing, and it really affects people in different ways. But we talk about injuries that can happen on the site. One of the things that people don't think about, especially if they're doing any roof work or on elevated heights, is that there could be falling objects. There could be anything from power tools, ladders, anything that's not held down or tied down, unsecured equipment. It can slide off of a surface. It can be knocked over when the worker's just moving or changing positions. And anybody who's in the construction business may be hearing this and saying, well, that's common sense. You want to make sure you're safe, but it happens. Unexpectedly, things get knocked over and sent down 20, 30 feet. And if they do hit someone below, very serious injuries can result. I've had several cases where actually a sledgehammer fell from probably about 30 feet above and didn't hit someone completely straight on, but part of it caught the person. They were very badly injured, and that worker did everything they could to try to secure that. But sometimes these things happen. But in winter months, when things are slippery and icy, extra care has to be taken, especially by those below and above.
Great point. Great point. When you think about all that so it is a beautiful season in New York, but it can be clearly, as Joe pointed out, can be dangerous, just as witnessed by the number of accidents in general that occur, right? From all other seasons versus the winter season. So any final points as we take a look at all of this? It seems like there are some common themes here, which are all together not that different from some of our other webinars, but winter in particular adds a whole other dynamic. And that theme is caution and being defensively aware of your surroundings, and exercising some common sense about following distance behind other cars, ensuring that your vehicle is properly prepared for the winter, getting those winter tires on, making sure your windshield wipers are good, your brakes are good, etc. But final thoughts from each of you, as you yourselves you've got to go out and operate in this weather as well. I mean, Peter, what are some of the steps you and your family take and in preparation for the upcoming season? And any final thoughts from you as well, Jamie? You can kind of pass the baton, Peter, over to Jamie.
Sure. There's no substitute for experience. And, obviously a 30, 40, 50-year-old driver or a 30, 40, 50-year-old person who's walked on icy and dangerous conditions might be a little bit better suited to handle it than a teenager, 15, 20, 25-year-old. Maybe they haven't dealt with it as much. Maybe they haven't driven in those conditions. Just explaining the potential pitfalls of these bad weather situations to the younger people is something that I think is a good idea. Helping them understand that we don't expect these things to happen, but they can happen. Maybe having extra things like flares or something in the car that if you do end up going off the road, have a plan in place. Make the phone calls that you need to make if something does happen. But exercising caution in the winter, it seems like it's a common sense thing, but it's like, well, you only realize how much it can affect you when it does happen to you. So everybody's family is different. Everybody approaches it a different way, but exercising that caution and care, whether it be just in a family setting or in a business setting, if they do work for a construction company. What can I do to try to make it a little bit safer when the weather flies?
And it will fly. Jamie, final thoughts?
I think Pete did a great job summarizing that. Being mindful of not only what you're doing, but you can take all the steps that you need to protect yourself, but make sure that you're protecting others as well. Being mindful, expect the unexpected. Just because you're doing something doesn't mean that another car isn't speeding. So just be aware of your surroundings. I keep extra blankets, I keep flashlights, I stock up in the wintertime just to make sure if there's an issue, I know I'll be warm. If I'm stuck on the side of the road, I've got flashlights if it's dark. So please be prepared because you never know what's going to happen.
Also, yes, thank you for that. Stanley Law has an app, an accident app that's, we have a version for both Apple as well as the iPhone as well as Android. That can be downloaded right on the homepage from StanleyLawOffices.com. You can download that for your phone. Because one of the points on one of the early slides was knowing before you go. And we actually put that at some of the points in prep for this webinar today. Know before you go. And what does that mean? That means to your point, Jamie, and Peter, make sure that you've done all you can to expect the unexpected, that you are keeping your family prepared and safe with proper care of your vehicle, as well as all preventative measures that you can put in place, your snow tires, etc. But the accident app is, if you have the opportunity to download it, it's free. And you can put all of your personal information in there, your medical information, emergency contact info. I mean, if in the case, goodness forbid, that you are in an accident and you're not able to be responsive, what they're going to look at your driver's license, your insurance, your registration, et cetera, to find out. They're going to get you medical care first, and then they're going to find out who to notify. But if you are able to be responsive to the degree of all of your information is there, it's connected to your medical records in the accident app. It's also connected to the law firm. So if there is an accident and you want to contact your lawyer, your insurance company right away, et cetera, you can have all of that information put into that app. It's all at your fingertips, ready to go. Again, you can download it at stanleylawoffices.com. It's a free app. It's smart to have. And I want to just encourage each of you to share this webinar. It will be archived on Facebook, of course, because it was streamed live. It'll also be able to be located both on the Stanley Law Office's YouTube channel, as well as on the website itself. You just simply go to the navigation bar and click resources and webinars. Under resources on stanleylawoffices.com, there's also a tab for FAQs. And Jamie and Peter, I know we keep meaning to have you. We want you to offer up some more FAQ videos, because this was super helpful today, and I thank you both. But you can watch those FAQ videos and share them if you know if someone has a relevant case or question. Joe is always working to provide free legal advice, both on many radio stations across upstate New York, but you'll see him on the Joe Knows segments as well, and out and about in the community with musicforthemission.org, to which we have an event actually coming up this weekend in Sackett's Harbor. So you can visit musicforthemission.org to see the different events that are happening there and how the team at Stanley Law is working every day to give back to the communities that we serve. Thank you both for being here today. And thank you to those watching and those who will be watching through the recorded version. Stay safe out there, stay smart, be wise, and enjoy the beautiful winter season that Central New York has to offer. Take care, you both.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Angela.
Bye-bye.